My coworker came over during the storm, then whispered, "They framed me." The rain hit the balcony glass hard enough to shake the frame. Then someone knocked on my door like the hallway was flooding behind her. I set the merger file down on the granite kitchen island and switched off the tactical flashlight before moving toward the entry. The power had failed 20 minutes earlier, leaving the apartment in a dark hush broken by thunder, distant sirens, and the hard slap of water against 30 floors of glass. The city below had disappeared into black rain and red emergency lights. My temporary apartment had been selected for efficiency, not comfort. One sofa, one guest room, one narrow table for case files, and nothing personal enough to make anyone believe I planned to stay. The second knock came sharper. 3 fast strikes. A pause, then one more. Not random panic. A pattern. I looked through the peephole. Elena Parker stood under the emergency hallway light with a waterproof folder clutched against her chest. Her trench coat was soaked dark from shoulder to hem. Her hair had slipped loose from its pins, and rainwater ran from her sleeve onto the carpet. At the firm, Elena was the senior vice president of communications, the woman executives called when a sentence needed to carry authority without sounding afraid. Tonight, she looked like someone who had walked through a river and refused to let the current take the only evidence she had left. I opened the door. She looked past my shoulder before she looked at me, checking the room, the hallway, the exits. Her fingers tightened around the folder until the plastic seam creaked. "I need 5 minutes off the street," she said. "My car stalled near Mercer. My phone died. The flood cut off my block." Then she lifted the folder a few inches. "And Claire framed me?" That sentence changed the weather inside the apartment. Elena had not crossed 6 flooded blocks just to escape the storm. She had brought physical copies of merger access logs before Claire Morgan could turn a forged digital trail into a board complaint. Claire wanted Elena removed before the restructuring vote, and if she could make the board believe Elena had leaked confidential merger documents to the financial press, Claire could take control of communications before anyone questioned the timing. That made it my problem. The firm had hired me as an external crisis negotiator and corporate risk consultant for the merger. My contract was narrow but powerful: contain operational sabotage, preserve evidence, and prevent internal panic from destroying the deal. If Claire's accusation was false, protecting Elena's evidence was not personal rescue. It was the work I had been brought in to do. I stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come in." Elena crossed the threshold. Her shoes left wet marks on the hardwood. Her hands shook around the folder, but her chin stayed level, as if the hallway were a boardroom and the storm were only another hostile executive. I pulled a heavy cotton towel from the hall closet and handed it to her. "Guest bathroom is down the hall. Door closes from inside. Fresh towels are in the cabinet. I'll put dry clothes outside the door and stay in the kitchen." Her eyes flicked to mine. A small nod. Not relief yet. Assessment. "Thank you." I set a camping lantern on the kitchen island and turned the brightness low, enough to keep the hallway safe without throwing light toward the guest bath. From the laundry shelf, I took a gray sweatshirt and sweatpants still folded from the last wash. I left them on the stool outside the closed bathroom door, then returned to the kitchen and faced the rain-streaked windows while the emergency radio crackled through flood alerts. The city was underwater in pieces. Flash flood warnings, power outages, subway shutdowns. No taxis moving through our district, no safe route to the corporate tower before morning, no reliable cell service inside the concrete grid while backup generators fought to keep the high-rises breathing. When the bathroom door opened again, Elena stepped into the kitchen wearing my spare clothes, the folder still sealed under one arm. The sweatshirt was too large on her and the sweatpants had been rolled twice at the cuffs, but they were dry. She had wrapped her damp hair in a towel, and every line of her face had tightened into professional control. I set a bottle of water beside a legal pad. "Drink first," I said, "then give me facts." She sat at the island and placed the folder between us. "Claire is filing a formal complaint with the board tomorrow morning," she said. "She claims I leaked confidential merger documents to the financial press." "What does she have?" "Digital server logs, my secure login, my IP address, time-stamped at 11:04 last Tuesday night. I wrote the time down, 11:04 p.m. Where were you? At the office until just before 11. That is what makes it look bad. She pressed both hands around the bottle, but she did not drink. I was alone on my floor finishing the press strategy. I packed up around 10:50. I took the executive elevator to the garage and left before 11. I remember the 11 o'clock news starting when I pulled onto the street. If you were driving at 11:04, you were not on the internal network. Claire says the logs prove otherwise. Claire has a story. I said, not proof. Elena opened the folder. Inside were printed screenshots, handwritten notes, and 3 pages of raw access logs copied before the storm knocked out district power. She had circled the suspicious entries in blue ink: login path, external server address, credential handshake, timestamp, exit route. The pages were damp at the edges from her coat, but the ink had held. I looked at her over the lantern glow. You pulled these before coming here? I knew the dashboard could be altered. The archive terminal still had a print function. Her fingertips touched the top page, flattening one wrinkled corner. If I waited until morning, Claire would control the narrative. Good. She was not running blindly. She had preserved evidence. That was the first clean clue that Claire's trap might break. I turned the legal pad toward her. Start from Tuesday morning. Every access point, every meeting, every place Claire or her assistant could have been near your terminal. For the next 2 hours, the apartment became a war room. Rain hammered the windows. The lantern hummed faintly. Elena drank half the water, then forgot the bottle existed as we mapped the day line by line. At 8:10, she entered the building. At 9 o'clock, merger communications meeting. At 11:30, Claire asked for a copy of the press calendar. At 2:15, Elena left her office to brief legal. At 2:18, Claire's executive assistant entered the communications floor. At 2:23, the assistant left. At 10:50, Elena packed up. At 10:58, her keycard swiped out of the underground garage. At 11:04, her credentials supposedly transferred documents to an external server. I tapped the pen on the final time. There's the gap. Elena leaned closer to the pad, not toward me, but toward the evidence. 6 minutes. Claire's story requires you to be in 2 places at once. She'll say remote access. Then we prove you were driving and that the script was delayed from inside the building. She looked up. Can we? I can't pull city camera footage by magic, I said. But Miles Hayes can send a legal preservation request through external counsel before morning. If traffic cameras caught your plate between the garage and your condo, the timestamp gives us a hard physical contradiction. Miles will help. He likes clean timelines and hates sloppy liars. That earned the smallest shift at the corner of her mouth. Not a smile, a crack in the ice. I handed her the water again. 3 more sips. It sounds like an order. It is a hydration recommendation with hostile intent. This time, she almost laughed. She drank. At 1 in the morning, I gave her 3 options. I can call Miles and see if any hotel across town has a room on emergency power. I can take you to the firm's conference suite once floodwater drops below the garage ramp, or you can use the guest room here. The door locks from inside. I'll sleep on the sofa. Your folder stays with you unless you choose otherwise. She looked toward the windows. Lightning turned the city white for half a second. The street below was no longer a street, only black water reflecting ambulance lights. The roads are closed, she said. Yes. My condo still has water on the first floor. Yes. And if I go to a hotel, Claire can say I disappeared before the complaint. She will say whatever helps her. Elena folded the printed logs back into the waterproof folder and pressed the seal closed. Guest room, she said, door locked. Good. I walked her to the hallway, left a second lantern on the floor outside the guest room, and stepped back before she entered. Nathan? I stopped. Her hand rested on the doorframe, the folder tucked under her arm. You believe me? I verify everything, I said, but no competent executive leaks merger documents using her own credentials at a time that contradicts her physical exit log. A breath moved through her shoulders. Good night, Elena. The door closed. The lock clicked. Only then did I return to the kitchen and call Miles. He answered on the fifth ring, voice rough with sleep. Someone better be bankrupt or dead. Neither. Claire Morgan may have forged a merger leak through Elena Parker's credentials. A pause. Then the sound of him sitting up. Tell me there's a timestamp. There are several. Beautiful, he said. I'll make coffee. By morning, the storm had softened, but the city had not recovered. Power remained out across half the district. Traffic barely moved. Elena emerged from the guest room with her damp hair pinned back, her briefcase squared against her hip, and every word clipped enough for a boardroom. The borrowed clothes were folded over one arm. Her own suit jacket was still damp, but she had arranged it carefully enough to make it look deliberate. Her armor was back. The folder was still in her hand. I said coffee on the island. Miles filed the preservation request at 2:40, I said. External counsel confirmed receipt. We may not have footage by the first meeting, but the request itself shows evidence is being preserved. Elena took the cup. Black coffee. No sugar. Stress. What happens when Claire files? We stop HR from treating a forged digital trail as disciplinary fact. Then we force everything into independent forensic review. She will try to make me look unstable. She already started. Elena's eyes lifted. I turned the laptop toward her, using a secure hotspot from an emergency battery pack. An industry blog had posted a blind item at 6:03 that morning. Senior communications executive suspected in merger leak. Internal sources cite erratic management and possible retaliation against restructuring. Elena read the headline once. Her hand tightened around the coffee cup. The ceramic clicked against the counter when she set it down. Claire leaked that. Probably. The board will panic. Yes. What do I do? I slid the legal pad across the island. You do not argue emotion against optics. You walk in with a timeline. You ask for third-party verification. You do not resign. You do not apologize for a leak you did not commit. Outside, thunder rolled farther away. Elena looked at the paper. Then at me. Okay, she said, one variable at a time. That was the first phrase of mine she kept. We reached the corporate tower just before 10. The lobby smelled like wet wool, generator fuel, and expensive coffee. Emergency lighting made the marble look colder than usual. The elevators were running on backup power, slow and crowded, so we took the stairs to the 10th floor. Claire Morgan waited near the glass conference room, with 3 HR representatives and a manila folder held against her tailored navy suit. She looked polished, prepared, and predatory. Elena, Claire said, soft enough for witnesses. I'm relieved you came in. Given the circumstances, I was concerned. Elena did not answer. She looked at Davis from HR instead. Has a complaint been filed? Davis adjusted his glasses. A preliminary concern has been submitted. With unverified digital logs, I asked. Claire's eyes moved to me. Mr. Reed, this is an internal personnel matter. No, I said. It is a merger security incident involving confidential documents, public leak exposure, and potentially manipulated access records under Section 4, Paragraph B of my retainer. Any internal event threatening merger integrity falls under independent risk review. I placed my phone on the conference table and started a time-stamped memo. Davis, confirm whether HR intends to begin disciplinary action based on logs that have not been forensically authenticated. Davis looked at Claire. Then at the phone, we can pause pending independent review. Claire's smile thinned. That seems unnecessarily dramatic. So is accusing a senior executive of a merger leak with a 6-minute physical timeline gap, I said. Elena placed the waterproof folder on the table. These are raw archive printouts from last night, she said. I am formally requesting that all claims involving my credentials be frozen until physical access records, keycard logs, and traffic footage are reviewed by external counsel. Her voice held, not loud, not pleading. On record. Davis reached for the folder. Claire stepped forward. I would caution HR against accepting documents gathered outside normal chain of custody. They were printed from the archive terminal before the power failure, Elena said. The print timestamps are on the pages. If you want to challenge chain of custody, do it through external audit. Davis took the folder. The first perimeter held, but Claire was not finished. For the next week, we worked in controlled blocks. Not every night at my apartment. That would have blurred the wrong lines. On Monday, we used the firm's conference suite. On Tuesday, Elena's condo was still drying from the flood, so she chose the guest room again. Door locked. Folder with her. On Wednesday, we moved to Miles's office after external counsel opened a secure case file. The domestic anchors stayed practical. Lantern when the conference suite lights flickered. Legal pad for the timeline. Bottled water when Elena forgot to drink. Coffee when the data got ugly. The thermostat raised 2 degrees when her hands went cold during the policy review. Every comfort had a function. Every function kept the case moving. On Wednesday evening, before we moved the case to Miles's office, Elena found a second clue I had missed. She was sitting at the end of the conference table with the archive printouts spread in 3 neat columns, the lantern beside her because the suite lights kept dipping under generator load. I had been focused on the server path. She focused on language. "This phrase is wrong," she said. I looked up from my laptop. "Which phrase?" She turned one of the draft leak emails toward me. The press version says the merger will trigger redundant communications assets. Claire uses that phrase. I don't. My department style guide forbids it because it makes people sound like furniture. I crossed the room and read the paragraph. She had circled 3 phrases in blue: redundant communications assets, unavoidable optics, leadership correction. All 3 appeared in Claire's internal memos from the last quarter. Elena opened a separate folder and laid the printed memos beside the leak draft, matching phrase to phrase without raising her voice. The paper made a dry, precise sound against the conference table. "That does not prove she sent it," I said. "No," Elena replied. "It proves whoever drafted the leak was writing from Claire's vocabulary, not mine. Give that to Miles. If the metadata trail points to her assistant, the language pattern supports motive." I wrote language pattern on the legal pad and underlined it twice. Elena watched the pen move. "Your handwriting really is a public safety issue. It has survived depositions. That is not an endorsement of the justice system." Thursday night. Miles arrived at the conference suite with a paper bag of sandwiches and the expression of a man who had slept badly for a noble reason and wanted credit for it. "I bring calories and bureaucracy," he said, dropping both onto the table. Elena looked up from the keycard logs. That may be the least romantic sentence ever spoken. It was not meant to be romantic. "Good." Miles pointed at her. "I like her." I opened the bag and slid a sandwich toward Elena. 3 bites. She gave me a flat look. "You are becoming predictable. You are becoming underfed." Miles sat and opened his laptop. "Before this becomes a wellness retreat, external counsel got the first municipal response. Camera at West Mercer caught Elena's car at 11:03:41, 2 miles from the office, moving west." Elena stopped unwrapping the sandwich. The room went quiet except for the hum of the ceiling vent. Miles turned the screen. A grainy still showed Elena's car passing through a flooded intersection, headlights cutting across standing water. Timestamp 11:03:41 p. 6 minutes after her garage exit, 19 seconds before the alleged document transfer began. Elena's fingers moved to the edge of the table. This time, they did not shake. "That proves I wasn't in the building. It proves you were not physically at the office terminal," Miles said. "Next question is whether someone planted delayed remote access." "I know when they did it," Elena said. We both looked at her. She pulled the Tuesday access calendar forward and tapped the 2:18 mark. "Claire's assistant entered my floor while I was briefing legal. She said she was leaving revised talking points on my desk. I thought nothing of it, because Claire had been pushing for message alignment all week." Miles leaned back. "There's our install window." I wrote it on the legal pad. 2:18 to 2:23 p.m. Possible script installation. The second clue locked into place. By Friday, the forensic firm confirmed a delayed remote access script had been installed from a USB device on Elena's office terminal. By Saturday, Miles traced the script compiler to a machine assigned to Claire's executive assistant, By Sunday, Claire escalated. The blind item became a named rumor on 2 financial newsletters. The board called an emergency session for Monday afternoon. Elena received a draft resignation agreement from HR, framed as a protective measure to save the merger from reputational harm. She came to the conference suite holding the printed agreement in one hand. The paper had been folded once. Hard. They want me to resign before the board meets. I took the agreement and read the first paragraph. Administrative leave, mutual non-disparagement, no admission of wrongdoing. Voluntary transition, a clean corporate burial. I set it down. No. Elena's laugh came once, sharp and humorless. You haven't even finished reading it. I don't need the rest. If you sign this, Claire wins before the evidence is heard. If I don't sign it, the board may fire me anyway. Then make them do it in front of the timeline. She turned toward the window. Rain had returned, lighter this time, ticking against the glass instead of attacking it. I have fought for 5 years to prove I belong in that room, she said. Every promotion came with a whisper. Every hard decision became evidence that I was difficult. Claire knows exactly which words make them nervous. I did not step closer. I moved the legal pad into her line of sight instead. Then we do not answer whispers, we answer sequence. Garage exit, traffic camera, assistant access window, USB install, delayed login, external server transfer, blog leak, draft resignation. Her eyes moved down the page, one line after another. The paper steadied her breathing. What do you need from me? She asked. 10 minutes away from the resignation agreement? Then you rehearse your opening statement. I thought you were handling the timeline. I am, but you are opening the meeting. Her head turned. Me? Yes? Claire is trying to make you look like a problem being managed. You walk in first and make it clear you are the executive protecting the merger. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she picked up the legal pad. Fine, she said, but your handwriting is terrible. Miles raised a hand from the corner. It is. I've filed complaints. Elena's mouth curved. Small relief. Enough to keep the room human. Monday's boardroom was glass on 3 sides, suspended high over a city still drying from the flood. 12 executives sat around the mahogany table. The CEO, David Warren, looked exhausted. Claire sat at the far end, hands folded over a folder, expression arranged into sober disappointment. Elena sat at the center. I stood near the projector. Miles sat with external counsel and the forensic audit packet. David opened the meeting. We are here because the merger has been compromised by allegations of a confidential document leak from the communications department. Elena stood before anyone could frame her. Before this board discusses my resignation, I am formally requesting that the independent risk timeline be entered into the record, she said. The allegation against me rests on a digital login at 11:04 p.m. last Tuesday. Physical evidence shows I was not present and could not have initiated that transfer. Claire sighed softly. Of course, Ms. Parker has prepared a counter-narrative. Elena looked at her. No, I prepared a timeline. I clicked the remote. The first slide appeared. Garage exit, 10:58 p.m. Traffic camera, 11:03:41 p.m. Alleged server transfer, 11:04 p.m. External server receipt, 11:04:19 p.m. I kept my voice level. Municipal footage obtained through external counsel confirms me's. Parker's vehicle was 2 miles from the office, 19 seconds before the alleged transfer began. The office terminal event could not have been manually executed by her at that time. David leaned forward. Remote access? Miles stood. The forensic audit found a delayed access script installed on Ms. Parker's terminal at 2:21 p.m. earlier that day. Installation required physical access to her office machine or an authorized USB device. I brought up the next slide. Communications floor access, Claire's assistant, 2:18 p.m. Exit 2:23 p.m. Script timestamp 2:21 p.m. The room changed subtly, but completely. Claire's fingers tightened over her folder. My assistant delivered talking points. She said, "That is hardly criminal." No one said criminal yet. Miles replied, We said install window. Elena opened the folder in front of her and distributed the raw archive printouts. These were printed during the blackout before the dashboard records could be revised. She said, "They show the original access path, the delayed trigger, and the external server destination." David picked up the first page. Claire stood. "This is absurd. Elena has every motive to sabotage the merger. Her department faces restructuring. She has been erratic, defensive, and increasingly—" "Careful," Elena said. One word. "Calm enough to cut through the room." Claire stopped. Elena did not raise her voice. "I have made difficult decisions under pressure. That is not erratic. I have defended my team. That is not instability. And I preserved these records because someone attempted to use my credentials to leak confidential merger documents and remove me before restructuring discussions began." She turned to David. "If this board still wants my resignation after reviewing the evidence, ask for it directly, but do not call it voluntary." No one moved. Then Miles slid one final document across the table. "External counsel also traced the first blind item submission to a private office network associated with Claire Morgan's department. The full report is in your packet." Claire's face went pale. David closed the folder slowly. "Claire," he said, "you are placed on administrative leave pending legal review. Your access is suspended effective immediately." Claire looked around the room. No one rescued her. Security escorted her out 5 minutes later. No shouting. No drama. Just the clean end of a bad plan meeting better documentation. Afterward, David remained seated, both hands on the boardroom table. "Elena," he said, "this board owes you a formal apology. Your position is secure. Your record will be corrected in writing today." Elena nodded once. "Thank you. I also want written confirmation that my team will not be penalized for cooperating with the audit." David glanced at legal. "Approved. And the merger?" "Proceeding. And the public rumor?" Miles tapped the packet. "We issue a factual correction. No emotional language, no retaliation language, just timeline, audit, and confidence in leadership." Elena turned to me for the first time since entering the room. I did not speak for her. I only closed the legal pad. She had done the rest herself. Before we left the boardroom, Elena asked for one more item on record. She did not look at me first, and I was glad she did not. This had to be hers. "I want the communications team notified before any public statement goes out," she said. "They heard the rumor before they heard the facts. They deserve the facts from me." David nodded. "You may address them immediately." 20 minutes later, Elena stood in the smaller conference room with 12 exhausted staff members watching her as if their own futures were hanging from her next sentence. In a way, they were. She placed the same timeline on the screen. Not the legal version, the human one. She told them the merger was proceeding. Their work remained under review, but not under punishment, and no one would be asked to sign a resignation agreement because of someone else's sabotage. Elena let them have the reaction. She did not rush them back into productivity. She took questions until there were no more, then assigned the next practical steps: press correction, donor reassurance, investor call language, and internal FAQ. Fear left the room by inches because she gave everyone a task they could hold. When she finally stepped into the hallway, the legal pad was still tucked under her arm. She looked tired enough to lean against the wall, but did not. I handed her the coffee Miles had abandoned on the side table. "Terrible?" she asked. "Almost certainly." She took one sip, grimaced, and kept it anyway. "Good. Then at least one thing about today is predictable." 3 weeks later, my contract ended. The merger moved forward. Claire remained suspended pending legal review. The firm issued a clean public clarification stating that Elena Parker had been cleared by independent forensic evidence. Her team stayed intact through the transition, and David approved a formal review of Claire's department. The city dried out. Elena's condo repairs finished. My apartment regained power, lost the hum of emergency batteries, and returned to its clean, temporary silence. I was packing the last case file into a cardboard box when my phone rang. "Elena." I answered. "Read." You still answer like a locked conference room. I looked out the window. No rain this time. Just evening traffic moving under a pink-gray sky. Habit. I received the board letter. She said, cleared in writing. Personnel file corrected. Claire's access remains suspended. My team's restructuring plan is staying under my department. That is good. It is. A pause. Not crisis silence. Something else? My condo is fixed, she said. The floors are dry, the lights work, the router is terrible. That sounds like a serious operational risk. I thought you might say that. I let myself smile. Elena. Yes? Are you asking me for a technical consultation? No, she said. I am asking if you want dinner. Off the clock, after the contract, with no board packet on the table. I looked at the sealed case files by the door. Then at the dark hallway, where, 3 weeks earlier, a lantern had stayed on outside the guest room. You have choices, I said quietly. I know, she replied. That is why I'm making one. The words landed cleanly. No flood. No accusation. No emergency. Just Elena, steady on the other end of the line. What time? I asked. 7. Where? My place? I'll cook badly. You can criticize the router. That does sound like my area of expertise. And Nathan? Yes? You don't have to bring the lantern this time. I looked toward the kitchen island, where the legal pad had left a faint impression on the wood. Then I'll bring coffee. It better not be the terrible conference room kind. No promises. She laughed. Warm. Unhurried. Human. At 7, I stood outside her condo door with coffee in one hand and a small router in the other. The hallway light was on. When Elena opened the door, she wore jeans and a soft sweater, her hair pinned loosely back, no blazer, no folder, no armor. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she stepped aside. Come in, she said. The hallway light stays on until the router works. That may be all night. Then dinner had better be decent. I entered, not because she needed rescue, because she had invited me after the danger was over. The apartment smelled faintly of paint, coffee, and something warming on the stove. A folded board letter lay on the entry table, not hidden, not clutched, just filed with the rest of her life. Proof that the lie had ended. Proof that she had remained. I set the router on the table. Elena looked at it, then at me. One variable at a time, she asked. One variable at a time. She reached for my hand. This time, there was no storm pressing against the windows. No folder between us. No locked door down the hall. Only the steady light she had chosen to leave on. Closing thoughts. Core lesson. Real trust is built by protecting the truth, not exploiting vulnerability. Green flag. He gave her safety, choices, and evidence before he ever asked for closeness. Please like and subscribe so we can share more stories like this. The end.